never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi guys, welcome back to My Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. And today is a very beautiful day for another interview because I've got Lisa Gennosa with me. Lisa is a woman who, not by her own choosing, has become an expert in helping others to deal with addiction from the view of the family, from the view of the loved ones. And this is such a powerful and important role, because if you think about it, chemical addiction is 1 in 3 out there. And if you now imagine that each and every one person has at least one significant other, then you have to say that addiction actually affects 50% of the population, at least. Now, this is huge. And therefore, there is such a gray zone that no one actually talks about in society. And I'm here to make this world a little bit better, one interview at a time. And so is Lisa. And Lisa, I'm so glad that you came onto my show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This means the world to me, and really excited to share.
We both ended up in this situation here today. And if I would have asked you 20 years ago, hey, or maybe as a little child, you certainly didn't wake up one morning and say, yeah, hey, cool. Hey, Mummy, I know what I do. I'll write a book about families and addiction. Hey, no, who did you want to be when you were a little girl?
Oh, wow. I had a little bit of a tumultuous young childhood, so I really didn't have a grasp on what I was going to do. But I was always pulled towards biology and the sciences. I was always interested in that and sort of the psychological component of that. However, I'd never, being a person that works in science and medicine, there was never a point where I thought, I'm going to write a book. Literature and English were never in my, future, really. Matter of fact, I didn't really care for those courses.
Interesting.
And yet, what our family went through, it just started pouring out of me, and mostly because I would spend so much time with my patients and talking to them, and they were always lost, as lost as I was for so long with my own son. And so, I started writing more as a therapeutic purge, and somewhere along the way, it became clear that the words were potentially going to help somebody else. So I started sort of formalizing what I was writing, and then it turned into, oh, wait a minute, there's a million resources that people need access to, and information. Yeah. And the part that I didn't get in the beginning was really the decoding of the language of addiction. I didn't know what so much meant. And I feel like if I would have known much, much earlier, I would have been able to help my loved one much, much earlier, right? And that's my goal, is to get this stuff to people sooner, so they have more of that intervention to help someone that they love so much with substance use disorder.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You were pointing already to your profession and your love to biology, psychology. What was your nursing career? Where did you go into addiction at an early field? I know that your father was actually a DEA agent, was actually working in actually the law enforcement side of addiction. Did he talk about his work at home?
Was actually my mom.
Your mom?
Actually, my mom. That's okay.
Excellent.
Common, understanding.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Wow. Power woman.
My mom. And she had such a powerful influence in my life, because my mom had 5 children and still worked in liquor and narcotics as an agent. And I just looked up to her so much for that reason. And there was a point in my life where I thought, I need to find a way to combine law and medicine. This is not under any circumstances how I thought it was going to happen. But guess what? I work in medicine every day as a physician assistant in family medicine.
Right.
But I now work with law enforcement in crisis intervention training, basic law enforcement training, mental health training, and working on the legislative level as well. So here I am working in medicine and law. And that's what I wanted to do when I was, first getting started in school.
And that is so beautiful. That is so necessary, because we have got always, certainly over the last, probably 50 years, I guess, at least, there was clearly a criminalization of addiction. Addiction was a matter of the law. It was prior to that, it was a moral issue. And so it was really the understanding that addiction is actually a mental health problem. That really only came about 10, 20 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And there is still, in law enforcement circles around the world, there is still, I guess, that grasp, that attitude, because addicts do bad things. There's no two ways around that, because they need money, they need a fix. So therefore, they do whatever is necessary for them to stop the pain. And therefore, that is what, unfortunately, the police has to deal with. And it's lovely to hear that you're trying to humanize the perpetrator. And that is, I think, such a wonderful thing. But, I mean, how the hell did you get into that situation? Tell us a bit about your story with your son.
Yeah, we got into that situation because of a very bad outcome with law enforcement. My son was suicidal. He had a blood alcohol content of greater than 0.4, which we know can be very, very serious, very deadly in some cases. The night that he was suicidal, he had also hit his head, so he was transported to the hospital, and for head injury, for intoxication, and for suicidal ideation. And ultimately, a number of things had happened, but they did call in a mental health deputy, which is supposed to have an additional about 20 hours of training to handle that situation. All the individuals involved, emergency room physician, the on-call psychiatrist, the social worker, they all agreed and definitively said he needed to go to a mental health facility because of his suicidal ideation. There was a lot of stuff that happened that night. He was unarmed. He wasn't harmed to anybody else. The only person he wanted to hurt was himself. There was underlying trauma that we didn't know about yet. Of course, nobody at the hospital knew about yet, but we learned that later. However, it really shouldn't have mattered that night. There was an officer that came in. He was not happy to be there. It was the middle of the night. He was dealing with another drunk, and not happy about it. He took him to jail that night. They got him out of the bed. He was completely exposed in the front. His gown was open in the front. He had no clothes on underneath. They had him in handcuffs, and they took him to jail instead of the mental health facility that night. After a while, they took off his handcuffs. He was able to cover himself up. And within about 12 hours, they put him in solitary confinement. So for about 3 days. So as you know, anybody that's suicidal, the worst case scenario that could happen happened to him. So furthered, any kind of trauma or subsequent PTSD from that event really just made things so much worse. So as a result, it took a while. Initially, I wrote to legislators and I, went to the ends of the earth to try and get help for him. He ultimately was put in jail for a little while and then went to rehab and was sober for 2 years after that. And we thought that was his rock bottom, but that ended up not even being close, believe it or not. But as a result of what happened to him that night, it was really critical to me to understand after I got through the anger and the disappointment and really the rage about what happened, I said, why did this happen? What happened to this professional that was supposed to take care of my son? So I looked at it and I said, there had to have been some professional burnout, some compassion fatigue, maybe his own mental health was in poor check. And that's what really instigated. Once my son was sober, I then took my opportunity to volunteer and go out for crisis intervention training to teach officers about mental health, about de-escalation, about crisis intervention, and about their own mental health, like having their own check. And it was really transformative, not just for me, because it was very healing for me to be able to do that. And I know that, look, I want to say this was not a systemic situation with our police. I never felt that way. I've always been very supportive. My mom was an officer my whole life. I've always been supportive of the police, but I felt like there were particular situations, like with my son, and I didn't want that to happen to somebody else. And that's why we do these things. You just don't want these horrible things to happen to somebody else. And so it was pretty amazing because, boy, at the end of some of my talks, really like hardcore narcotics agents would come up to me that've been in the field for decades, with tears in their eyes. And they'd say, you know what, it's time for me to do some self-examination. And I said, that is the only reason I was doing this.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. What time frame are we talking about here? When was the sort of critical event with your son? How old was he?
So he was about, oh, I'm sorry.
No, ladies first, ladies first.
It was December 5th, 2017. So that was about 6 years ago. So he was in his early 20s.
What was the lead up to that? With hindsight, were there the signs on the wall? And you were yeah.
Oh, yeah. So
what were some of the signs that with hindsight you picked up that your son was not happy, that things were not as straight as you thought they might have been?
So he had, his addiction started at the age of around 12 to 13. He started drinking at his father's home. We were divorced and we didn't know that he was drinking, and certainly wouldn't have any reason to say, hey, don't drink over at your dad's house, or call his dad and say, don't, that didn't seem logical at the time, but he was drinking, and he found that alcohol became a very immediate soothing remedy for him right from the start. When he was trying to deal with, young teenage years and awkwardness and things like that. Well, it escalated and it escalated, and we didn't know. And I always emphasize, this is a medical home. I work in medicine. My husband works in medicine. You would think, maybe people would think these folks should have been more aware, but we were not. We were
exactly.
not. He had the typical sort of signs, or mood swings and difficulty sleeping, maybe some changes in school, some challenges with relationships. He had bullying that was happening to him. So there were things that but when you're going in those young teenage years, there's some overlap with normal hormonal changes, normal when young people are trying things for the first time, just seeing how what they like and what they don't like, and so you have some expectation. But where things went really bad is in college. So he left for college, and he was kicked out within about 3.5 months. And the college called at that point and said, you need to get him some help. He's in trouble.
Wow.
With drugs and alcohol.
Wow.
And so that was really our first awakening. He was really incredible at making us believe that he was okay and going to be okay. So we proceeded to let him sort of make some choices for himself. Those choices turned out pretty bad, and he things got worse and worse. And he had, before the December 5th in 2017, he had gone to rehab already, I think once or twice. So the December 5th rehab visit was the third, or maybe second or third, and he went a total of 9 times.
Define rehab to me. Are we talking the traditional rehab in the inpatient rehab, 4 weeks kind of thing?
Yeah, the inpatient rehab 9 times. He also, a couple of them were a little bit longer. The first one was a 3-month program that he left early at about 2 months. He went to inpatient. He stayed with outpatient, like intensive outpatient therapy.
Okay.
He stayed in sober homes. So, he's kind of been through all of that.
Wow. You were pointing towards the alcohol as a sort of early start.
Yeah.
You then also mentioned drugs. What drugs came in?
The main drugs were marijuana, cocaine, and hallucinogenics.
Wow. Okay.
Later.
Put it all in, shake, add some hormones. Oh my God.
Oh my God. When the brain is trying to develop.
Exactly. Right. Exactly right. Oh boy. It is hard for you because here you were still a single mom at that stage.
No, I was married, and so I did have some help, but I still felt alone for a long time, and
yes.
that was my fault. That was my fault. I didn't want to put the pain and the pressure on everybody else. So I took on most of it initially, but my husband was always right there, a rock, ready to help. But I pushed him away for a long time, and until later, and then he became an incredible support system for both of us, really, for my son and myself.
Which is so lovely to hear, because ultimately it is a very lonesome place for any parent to be in such a position, because there's all this guilt. There's a degree of shame. I mean,
Absolutely.
you were pointing towards the anger and the frustration to start off with in that particular incident, but now here you are. I mean, the writings were on the wall. Was there a lot of self-flagellation there? Did you probably a lot of soul searching? Let's put it positively. Did you think that you were part of the problem?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I held on to guilt like, I don't know, people hold on to air. It was all my fault for the longest time. And it's something now that I really, really work with parents to free themselves from that guilt. Because we all do the very best that we can with the knowledge that we have at the time. And what I didn't understand later is guilt is something that is a manifestation of what happened before in the past. So it's not based on what you know today, right? If you knew what you knew today, you wouldn't have done what you did then. So guilt is something that is just something from the past that we're holding on to, but we didn't know any better then. I really, at the time, now I understand, and really working with my son too. My son is incredibly emotionally intelligent. We have a great relationship. He's one of the biggest parts of how I got through all of this, believe it or not, and understood this. But he helped me to work through that guilt and to understand that it wasn't my fault. And that was really important. And it's really important for people to understand that earlier on, because you can wallow in guilt and you can lose your identity in guilt, and you lose the fight when you're sitting in that guilt for years and years and years. And that's what I was doing.
Wow. What to say? Wow. This is, I'm just reflecting as a parent, as a man who has been drinking himself far too much, therefore was not there for my children at a crucial time in their life, because I was working far too long hours and then drank in the evening. So I was an absent parent, for a lack of a better word. And do I feel guilty? Yes, I still feel guilty. And certainly my youngest son, who's nowadays 20, for a long time, he told me, yeah, shit father, kind of a thing. He left me alone and blamed me to a certain degree. and it is coming to terms with the difference between having done something bad and being a bad man. Right. And that is the key thing that we need to understand, and that is full circle now back to law enforcement and the attitude towards mental health patients as well as towards addiction, because hate the addiction, love the addict. I think this Absolutely. would be the key message that we both want to bring out. And wow, but this would have taken some time for you. I mean, there would be a huge transformation waiting for you from 2017 towards now. How did you go about that? I mean, who helped you? How did you get those insights?
It's such a great question, because it is a transformation and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, but I think the foundation was that I educated myself. I was already, like I said, like you pointed out, I was a PA, but I worked in family medicine, and I do a lot of mental health, and I take care of a lot of families that are dealing with substance abuse. But I still didn't have some of the most fundamental bits of information that I needed to help myself and help my son. So I started educating myself at the very ground level, and that started opening me up. And I don't just mean like, of course I tried Al-Anon. I went to meetings. I did family group meetings at my son's rehabs. I did all those things. And they were really important. But as I started to understand the disease of addiction, so that was critical for me, because I have to know why for everything. That's my, it's a curse. I have to know why. Why did my son have this? Does he have this? And why, what is the underlying source, the cause, that core, right? So I started digging deep and reading everything I could get my hands on for about 15 years. And that gave me so much power. Knowledge is power, right? So I had so much knowledge, and I turned that knowledge over into educating not just myself, but starting to educate others, which gave me more freedom as from my guilt. And then I started to advocate. So I went from educating myself, educating others, and advocating for everyone. Because the more we're advocating for everyone involved in addiction, we're advocating for ourselves and for our own loved one. So we have to be out there. And the other thing that helped me tremendously, I did the obvious stuff. I started going to therapy. I started working out, making sure I got the best sleep I could under the circumstances. That's hard to do. So I really tried those things. But the thing I think that really pulled me through after educating myself and doing those others was the volunteer part. So I went into work with incarcerated individuals that are in a recovery program here where I live, and they're in it's called the Sheriff's Heroin Addiction Recovery Program. And it first started with just men before the pandemic, and then it transferred into both men and women. And it kind of shut down for a little while, and I talk about that in the book, but later it opened back up, and I'm back in there now, and it's wonderful again, because I love working with these individuals. These are folks that kind of vetted into the heroin program while they're in jail, while they're incarcerated, and they get to be in a recovery program that's really funded by mostly volunteer. It's mostly volunteer funded, but the university's involved. I'm in professional, people are involved, lawyers, all kinds of individuals, social workers, students, social workers, things like that. And so they have a lot of access to a lot of recovery efforts that they wouldn't have, otherwise. And then they leave there and, kind of so my whole point is to reduce recidivism. We want to keep them from going back into jail. And this gives them some of those tools necessary to do that. So
nice.
I think if you can find whatever it is that is a sense of hopefulness for you as the family member, even when you're in the midst of the worst with your child or your spouse or your parent, reaching out to help others it's one of the hardest things to do when you're fearful for the lives of the one that you love. But somehow, and I don't understand how, it's the nature of the universe, but the more that you put out, the more it comes back to your family, as everyone says. And your loved one sees that, and it helps them heal as well.
That's true. That's very true. And that's the post-traumatic growth that we all are able to tap into if we're willing to do so, if we do our own work to actually get there. But let me go a little step back. You were saying something interesting, because you mentioned that the incident with your son, the key incident, was 2017. But you mentioned that already for 15 years you had an interest in that topic. So something would have sparked that. And what I want to do now is be a bit of devil's advocate and maybe dig a bit deeper, and because I want to go genetics and epigenetics. So genetics is basically, we have got about 50 genes that are isolated, that working together make you a little bit more likely to become an alcoholic or become an addict down the line. So if you were to go back to yourself, and maybe in your line going back, has there been addiction there? Have you had your experiences?
Actually, I don't. My family, I understand that they maybe great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather kind of thing before I was born. There may have been an issue way back then on my side. My son's father's side, which we divorced when he was very young. He has pretty strong addiction in his family, himself, his father. So the genetics were definitely there. I think the genetic line is a lot more widespread than we think. Whether it's a recessive gene or a dominant gene, I think it's in a lot of folks, but my son definitely had it. There was probably some from myself, and then quite a bit from his father. And so that was part of, his unfortunate underlying story. That's what he kind of was born into.
Exactly. And you can't do anything about that.
No,
and that is genetics. But there is epigenetics. Now, epigenetics means the soup of influences that from internal or external wash over these genes and switches some of them on or off, depending upon how we look after ourselves or how we look after our family. And I think that is the key to it. We nowadays know that, for example, an early exposure to alcohol is actually very detrimental. It makes it far more likely that this young growing brain says, "Ooh, I like that. Yes, please give me more." And that's where some people advocate actually the drinking age should be 25. Because when you start drinking after 25, it's far less likely that you develop alcoholic tendencies compared with starting earlier on. So there is that. It's interesting to hear you sort of saying the 15 years, though. What made you go into that field? What happened 15 years ago where you actually became intrigued?
Well, again, I think that the thing that made me want to go into medicine and law was the combination of my mother's work, I suppose, just being surrounded by that. But I've been immersed in this for 15 years with my son.
Right.
And I didn't really get into the advocacy of it until maybe 5 years ago or more, like a little before. So I've been immersed in it, but I couldn't start doing anything. And the whole point of the book was to say, get busy before 10 years goes by. Don't wait a decade.
Nice.
Like I did. It was foolish, because I was absent for a decade. No one saw me. I was hiding. I was in I was in my own hell. But I recognize now that you said those swoop of influences. I completely recognize now, which I didn't then. And these are important things to also be able to say, oh, these are the things why you shouldn't have that, carry around that guilt. My son and, my ex-husband and I divorced when my son was very young. He has more recently, in the last couple of years, started to understand the sort of known now abandonment issues that he was not willing to accept he's almost 30. So he was not willing to accept that could even be in his world, but he absolutely has every symptom of it in terms of not feelings of inadequacy, feelings of unworthiness. And he's felt that way his whole life. I'm not worthy. So when he found alcohol at the very young age, like you said, very young, 12 to 13, that cemented in the genetics, then the epigenetics that were occurring, and the young age that it happened at, the effect of it at that moment. The effect was profound, he says. Found God in a bottle, as people say. The effect was profound. And it became his coping mechanism for everything, as you probably hear a lot. And then became his only coping mechanism, his only one. Yeah. He was to the point in his addiction that if he kept drinking, he would die. And if he stopped drinking, he would die. Do you know what I mean?
That's why I'm laughing or why I'm smiling when you say such harsh words, because I recognize them within me. There was certainly a time when I was very much identifying with what you just said. And that's important. That's actually so important because it describes the pain of addiction, which in its own right is more trauma. It's an own self-licking ice cream. It just goes round and round and round and round. Yes. It's beautiful to break through that. So you were starting to work with law enforcement. Your son kept working with mental health professionals. And
he did.
That was really, really beautiful because you as a parent, you can't really take on that role. You have got a very different role. Was that clear to you? Or did you try to intervene as a nurse? Who was running the show, the nurse in you or the mom in you?
That's the best way to put it. That's the best way to put it, because it's such a fine line as a parent or even, a spouse, or I always kind of include everyone, because when we love someone with addiction, it doesn't matter. Your heart is completely immersed. And so, that codependency part of it becomes an issue. You have to recognize that, and, the enabling part. So it was always a fine line. The problem, I think, for us was that we had such a close relationship, and we communicated very, very deeply, he's very psychological, very philosophical, very intuitive. And even, and he did have a lot of sober years in his 15 years. Like, there were sober years, months, weeks, that we would have very intense conversations. And so it was always this fine line of understanding, where can I help without enable? Where can I, how much am I helping now that I'm hurting? How many times am I going to put his oxygen mask on and lose my own air? And it happened over and over and over again until I said, oh, I can't do that anymore. I'm drowning over here. I am drowning because I'm trying to keep him alive. And he recognized that too. And we had a moment. There was, I write about this in the book. There was a day, there was an event, and he was trying to get himself to intensive outpatient therapy. And in order to do that, he had to be sober. So he said he would stay with me to get sober, but he came over with his substance, which is, his DOC was alcohol. And within, because it took a couple days, So within about 2 to 3 days, I said, I woke up and I just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. I love you. I will support you and your sobriety. I will be here if you need help when you're sober at any moment. I will fly anywhere. I will go to the ends of the earth for you to support your sobriety. And I will always love you, but I can't support anything to do with your addiction anymore because I'm feeding the addiction and I'm taking away my son's life.
Wow. Were there further attempts of him to take his life?
No, nothing that was overt. He did have episodes of we call suicidal ideation. So there's passive and active suicidal ideation. So he had passive thoughts of wanting to die, but no active, plans or desires. But again, those were while he was drinking. When he's sober, it doesn't exist.
Beautiful.
He doesn't have, now I shouldn't say it doesn't exist because he does have depression. So there are very difficult times. But when you pound down the serotonin with a hammer for 15 years, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's very hard to regenerate serotonin, but it can happen. And I try to talk to people about that. It does happen. It can, but it takes time and it takes a lot of work, lot of work.
And it takes time. I can remember it took probably for me half a year, 3/4 of a year after stopping drinking, when one day I sort of drove along the road. There was a street vendor selling strawberries. I thought, hey, I'll buy some strawberries for the family. And I nicked one, not nicked, I bought the strawberries, put them in the car, took one out, ate it, and I thought, wow, this is the most beautiful strawberry I've ever tasted in my life. And there was this beautiful feeling came over me, and it was basically, it took this long for my body to self-regulate back to actually achieving normal spikes of dopamine, of serotonin, etc. And it was just an amazing feeling. And I thought, wow, the best strawberries! Wow, what did you do to grow them? So it was bizarre. So
that is the coolest story.
Yeah, it takes time for you to come back to an equilibrium. I think that's really, really important to know. So many things there. I think we need to understand that this is not a quick fix. And I think as parents, we want to go in there. As doctors, I'm an anesthetist, okay? I get called when shit hits the fan. I walk in there. I'm the knight in shining armor, the special forces. Okay, guys, move aside. Let me deal with it. Bang, 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 bang. Done. Okay, that took now 23 minutes. Okay, that's often my job. And here you come into such a situation where you're freaking powerless, where you often are helpless because there is not a quick fix of something. We men are particularly bad, regardless of profession. We are fixers, okay? And you can't fix addiction. You can't do with that. So how did you deal with the fixer in you? How did you deal with I want to do it now?
I sucked at it because like you, I have 15, 20 minutes with my patients or, maybe a little bit more sometimes. And so, you get this finite amount of time, you get in there, you do the job that you're supposed to do, and everybody leaves happy, you hope. And no, that wasn't, the case. I am a fixer for everything, that's what I do. I'm a solutions oriented individual. Everything has a solution. Everything has everything. So I drove my son crazy with that. But what I learned, too late again, which is why I say this is so important to learn this early on, is one of the most important things I should have done early on. Well, two things I should have done early on. Number one, I should not have stepped in that very first time when he got his DUI. And I stepped in to help with the lawyer and, the transportation and the pay and, the finances, whatever. Should never have done that the very first time. And then number two, I should have learned effective communication. And I learned, again, almost 15 years later. So it's been within, I guess maybe not 15, maybe 12 or 13, because it's been a couple years. There is a form of communication called the CRAFT method. And I'm a big advocate of it because I learned it. And it is community reinforcement and family training is what the acronym is for. But it is the type of communication that would be effective in nearly any situation, but it happens to be very effective for individuals with substance use disorder. As the family member, if I would have learned to communicate better early on, instead of the interactions that are, I guess, negative, and they land very hard and they don't resolve anything, right? Because everyone's angry and coming from a place of frustration and lack of knowledge and all these things. When you learn how to communicate, it can change everything. And I did start to learn how to communicate. And guess what? We did start to communicate so much more fluidly and, productively. And, so that's what I would highly encourage individuals to do early on is get effective communication training of some kind, whatever kind you like, whatever works for you, because it does help. If you love someone like I do so much, and you want to help them without enabling them, without overstepping your own boundaries, just learn how to communicate with them.
Just like that. Just like that.
But it's hard. No, it's not. It's so hard.
We are crap as humans. We are crap in communicating. Communicating for us means talking, not listening, not actually understanding. And that's so, but it is such beautiful words you're saying. And maybe it should highlight to all the viewers and listeners out there, God, we need some training in that because we are crap in it, okay? If we were not crap in it, there wouldn't be so many wars and so many misunderstandings and so many,
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for saying that. No, it's exactly right. But it takes a little time and it takes effort, and it just like anything. But it depends on what you want this outcome to look like and how dedicated you are. And I wanted my son to have the life that he always wanted. And I love him enough to put in the work for him. And I know millions of people feel the same way. Just tell me what I have to do and I'll do it. And that's why I say learn. It really took me a couple of months to get down that communication. I mean, just to, when I talk to family members, I kind of go through, like I have a sheet that says, instead of saying it this way, say it that way. There's a great cookbook in the United States that talks about eat this, not that. Have you seen that or heard of that? Eat this, not that.
Tell me more.
So it's called Eat This, Not That. And it all it is showing you what, instead of eating it like this, like, hamburger, cheeseburger, hamburger and fries and this way, eat it like this. And you have improved the health, of it by whatever percent, 50%, 100%. So this is the same type of thing. Say this, not that. I have an example. It says, instead of saying something like, what's going to be different this time? And you know how we say that? We say, what's going to be different this time? Or you're all mad. You say, I'm really glad you're giving this another try.
Nice.
There's a different way. Yeah, it's your different way that you're approaching that instead of being. And so it's really little tiny alterations in how you're approaching what you're saying that make a big, big difference and go a long way.
Absolutely. I think there are other ways how parents can also help. And that is really, again, it comes a bit back to what we said earlier with regards to modeling, going out there actually and helping, for example, others.
Yeah.
You can model that in your own life. We nowadays know that there are genomes in our body that we didn't get from mommy and daddy. In other words, the gut microbiome. And we know that plays actually a crucial role when it comes to serotonin levels, when it comes to the way that we are behaving as humans. And I think it is such an estimated yet so powerful intervention to actually change our own nutrition and to actually look after our guts, to stop the leaky gut, to stop to actually encourage those microbes, or those bugs that are living in us and that are helping to produce the good serotonin, the good
Yes.
other neurochemicals. And for those of you who think, what the hell is he talking about? We've got about 1.5 kilograms, so maybe 3 pounds or thereabouts, of brain tissue, of nerve tissue up there. You have got the same amount of nerve tissue in there. So
Correct.
next time you have got a gut feeling, yes, there is, there is something like that. Exactly. And I certainly know that once I actually dealt with my food allergies, once I knew what was actually good for my body, not, once I started a Mediterranean food plan, where really loads and lots of colors in your food, the more greens, the better, and a few variety basically, and cut out the carbs, cut out the shit, the highly processed food. Once you do that, your body is different. There was maybe 15 years ago now, Jamie Oliver, an English chef. He went to his local school and he looked what the children were eating at school, and it was basically processed shit.
Crap. Yes.
Indeed. So he said, no, I'll help you to cook. And it was a kind of a revolution that he started there in the school system. And they had all these absent days and all the sick days and the shit behavior from the children. The moment they changed nutrition at school, things completely changed. The sick days went down, asthma went down, negative behavior went down. They could very clearly demonstrate the benefit of just decent food at lunchtime for the children. It was one intervention that he did that completely changed within the school. And he then changed it from that school to the borough or to the little area of sort of 5 or 7 schools, and then to the county, etc. And then the government changed in the UK, and the whole thing went. But it was like a social experiment, and it showed the power of nutrition on behavior. Now imagine you do that step by step every day, and do that with your loved one. For me, certainly, when I went into rehab, we had a Filipino chef there, and we just always had beautiful, colorful food there. And it was the start of a beautiful journey. And I think there is something that you can do. You can, as a parent or as a loved one, you can make sure that the right food and nutrition and supplements are getting to your loved one. Because if you're an alcoholic, boy, your vitamin B levels are shot to hell. Your liver is all over the show. There's so many things where you can actually start helping. And this is just sitting on the dinner table. So here you get the food that helps you. You have the water, the hydration. You have got the connection, because the opposite to addiction is connection. You have got the ability to communicate. So the evening dinners together might actually be the key to you unlocking a relationship with your loved ones, isn't it? So just a few things to actually give you an example. And it sounds so stupid. It sounds so simple. You can't just fix an addict.
No, food is medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, food is medicine. I have this conversation 20 times a day with my patients. Food is medicine. And we are filling ourselves with filth and expecting grand outcomes, not to get sick. And that's not going to happen.
Bill, what a nice word. That is so this far more elegant than shit. I like that. Bill, I might take that on, actually.
Bill. I haven't been able to figure out what to do about this, but it is something that my son and I talk about a lot. He ended up working in behavioral health. And what he realized, and he was working specifically with individuals getting right out of jail and coming into the behavioral health system with substance abuse, right? So they were in recovery and they were getting fed food in his facility sometimes worse than what they were getting in jail. And what they're getting in jail is horrible. So you take an individual, right, who has substance use disorder or has a criminal background, who came from very troubled life, right? Probably never had the food as medicine sort of understanding, have always eaten food that's feeding the brain negatively. And we're expecting as a society, we're expecting them to overcome all of that. When you feed the brain, like you said, when you feed the brain shit, it's just not going to function at an optimal level. It's not going to function at an optimal level ever. And so one of the things I would love to do in my lifetime is find a way to improve that situation. And there are like pockets of people who have found, like, I was just watching a show recently, or a news story about young individuals on a college campus who they figured out that like 2 out of 5 students had food insecurity. And so they created a on-campus, like food service, where people brought in and volunteered to work there and brought in food sources from, all over the city. And everything was really on a volunteer basis. So I said, well, why aren't we doing that more globally for people that, if you're going to transition from jail to recovery, then you have a desire. You have that desire in your head to recover and to get better and to improve your situation. It has to start somewhere. Start it with the food that they're eating. Get them the food and the vitamins. That will help improve, and it'll enhance the recovery a little bit faster. It'll improve it a little bit more because they're getting that supplement source, that food source that is feeding positive, reinforcement. So it's something I want to do probably in my retirement.
Look, this is such a beautiful idea, actually. It is, and you can go one step further, not just learning how to actually cook and how to prepare food, but how to grow food. And it is.
I love that.
As far as I was concerned, if I were ever in power, one of the things that I would make mandatory would be a gardening and cooking courses for anyone who is on a benefit. So because it is such a powerful thing. Granted, we're here in New Zealand with a climate where you throw something over your shoulder and half a day later you need a machete to cut through it. So bottom line is a lot of things grow really well here. And you could make an argument that, I live in a big town, what the hell? If you go back to the last 100 years where civil wars has ravaged towns and people were trying to survive in towns, guess what? You can grow some spinach everywhere on a bloody windowsill, on a rooftop, etc. So you can actually you can do a lot of things. And by actually teaching people how to do that, you give them power. They're no longer helpless. They're actually now taking action. And that is turning them from a victim to a survivor. And that is beautiful. And then once you actually learn how to cook with those, whatever things you grow, suddenly you think, well, that is cool. And suddenly you pass those skills on, as our ancestors did for such a long time. These are all skills that we have forgotten, that were engineered out of us. It's social engineering in the 60s and 70s that we can blame for that. That when, prior to that, making your own bread was normal. And then it was suddenly, with advertisement, changed into, if you bake yourself, my God, you're obviously poor. You're obviously not sophisticated, because our microwave dish does exactly that for you here, just including the plastic. Yes, we know the plastic is probably more nutritious than what is in the food. But hey, that is another story. Okay. Yeah, it's my hobby horse here. So I'm here standing on the soapbox, guys. But there is something to be said about that, because I find it very empowering when I look after myself, when I actually hydrate, when I make sure I eat well, when I have not a standard American diet, but actually no processed food and just stuff that I've prepared. And it gives me pride. It gives me a good feeling. And that is often the
Absolutely.
start to go out there. And you can do that as a parent with your addicted son, with your addicted
Yeah.
daughter. Give them the life
Yes.
skills. Give them incorporate them into a life where you model a different way of coping, a different way of
Yes.
living. And that is what
Yes.
you're doing, Lisa. I mean, this is you're going out there and are trying to help others, and that is such a beautiful and powerful thing. So I'm so grateful to you and all the other mums and dads out there who are trying hard to be there. And I don't want to now exclude the aunties, the nephews, the whoever is out there. I give you all
So
a big
true.
hug, okay, because
So
you're
true.
the unsung heroes who are trying to help and who are often forgotten about and who are often feeling so helpless, abandoned, and just don't know where to go. So
Absolutely.
if you feel that you are fitting to that description, I think there is one source out there that you might want to have a look at. Lisa, show us the book.
Oh, I'd love to.
That
Take a look.
is
Here.
good. Incurable hope. Incurable hope. Just let that ring off your tongue because it is beautiful. Okay. Incurable hope. Where can people get the book?
You can get it wherever books are sold, primarily Amazon, of course, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, things like that.
Nice.
It is available right now, and it will be on Audible in about a month. Of course, it's on Kindle and it's on, paperback, but it will be on Audible soon. And you can always find me at my website, which also has a link directly to it. Is it okay if I
Oh,
give my
yes,
website
please. Don't you worry, guys.
It-
I mean, you hear it now, but look down there into the description of the YouTube and the video because all of her links are down there. But tell us.
It's at my website is www.lisagenosa.com, and you spell my last name Gennosa, Gennosa. So lisagenosa.com, very straightforward. So there's a
Beautiful.
lot of information on there, and hopefully, want to reach out to folks and connect and help others to, make a difference. If we're all doing this together,
Exactly.
if we're all working together, I mean, no one is doing this alone. No one's by themselves. I mean, you feel like you are, you feel isolated, but no one is alone. And there's so many of us out there that are willing to work together and help and make a difference. So it's just that connection.
If you think about it, great leaders surround themselves with power teams, and where basically they are the dumbest members of that team. So you've got someone who helps you with your finances, someone who helps you with, if you're a president, you want to know some specialist on military, specialist on foreign affairs, etc. So that's logical to you. Yet here we are fighting this battle often alone, driven by shame and guilt to not disclose that we are actually in trouble. How would it be if you create a power team where actually you talk to other parents or to other relatives who are much further down the line than you are, who know which resources are out there in person, immediately there? What was to happen if you actually open up to your family physician or to his nurse practitioner in this case and actually say, hey, look, I think I'm in trouble. Could you imagine, just maybe, that there will be a host of information available to you? Indeed.
That's so true. That's exactly what is, because people know of my story now. Boy, it really does. People open up when they know, when they feel like it's a safe place to have that conversation. And once they start asking questions, number one, you realize how much they don't know yet. And you realize how much help you can provide.
Absolutely.
And that's really, but you also realize how isolated and alone that they have been. And so you just really try to help people connect, because once you start that connection, you realize how many people are, like you said, probably half of the country at least has some affiliations. There's some relationship. The numbers that have seen are there are 25 million individuals in this country with just in the U.S. with substance use disorder, And that means that there are around 60 million individuals that are affected by someone, directly affected, whether emotionally, financially, with substance use. So 60 million people in just here. So multiply that by the globe.
I would think that is underreporting.
Me too.
I would think no. Yeah, about 320 million from memory. So to think that's 25, what is that, 7% of the population? Yeah, you wish.
I know. I think that's probably just the direct.
That's right.
Like
this is the tip of the iceberg you're describing there. I think there's so much more going on there. No, that's cool. Oh, Lisa, you're an amazing woman. You are a force of nature. You're going out there because you're thirsty to create change. You're thirsty to help others because you have been in the darkness. And now you have written this book, which is soon out on Audible. So guys, check it out. Okay, homework for you. And I can't wait to see where you're going, what you're creating next, where your path is leading you. It is please stay in touch, and I'm nearly certain that I will get you back in the future because you will transform further. You will come up with new ideas because that's what we do. We are so no, it's beautiful. Lisa, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. That was a beautiful insight. This was a beautiful talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great talk today, and I really appreciate the time with you today.
Thank you very much. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with passion. Okay, bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turning around.